When the original Xbox released, it was downright historic. And today, we're taking a trip down memory lane to explore the top 15 games of all time for the original Xbox. Microsoft's first foray into the gaming industry had a lasting impact on the gaming world, from its robust online service to its exclusive titles. The Xbox was a pure game changer, and I'm really excited to dive into the top 15 games that made it so special. As a reminder, the rankings are based on a combination of factors, including overall quality, replayability, and impact on the gaming industry. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. Now, coming in at number 15, a game that was synonymous with the original Xbox, Fable. It's a game that was ahead of its time and had a significant impact on the gaming industry. Fable was one of the first games to introduce a morality system that affected the game's story and ending. The game allowed players to make choices that would determine whether they would become the hero or they would become a villain. The consequences of their actions would be reflected in the game's story. Fable had a great story that was set in a medieval fantasy world, and it was filled with memorable characters that players could interact with. The game's protagonist, known as the Hero of Oakvale, was on a quest to save his homeland from an evil force known as Jack of Blades. Along the way, players could engage in side quests and explore the game's vast open world, which was filled with hidden treasures and secrets. One of the most impressive aspects of Fable was its dynamic world, which would change based on the player's actions. If the player chose to be a hero, the world will become a brighter and more prosperous place, with people cheering and thanking the player for their deeds. On the other hand, if the player chose to be a villain, the world will become darker and more dangerous, with people cowering in fear and avoiding the player. Fable was a game that players could sink hours into and still find new things to discover. The game's open world was filled with hidden areas and secrets, and players could customize their character's appearance and abilities to suit their playstyle. Fable also had a unique combat system that allowed players to use a variety of weapons and spells to defeat their enemies. Overall, Fable was a groundbreaking game that had a significant impact on the gaming industry. It introduced a morality system that would become a staple of many RPGs, and it had a vast open world that was filled with treasures and secrets. Fable was a game that players could sink hours into and still find new things to discover, and remains a classic of the Xbox era. Now, at number 14, we have the game that is credited with introducing that morality system, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. A game that not only had a great story, but was absolutely groundbreaking at the time with its morality system. The game's characters were also memorable and had well-written dialogue and unique personalities that made players care about their fates. The game's impact on the Star Wars franchise cannot be overstated, as it introduced a new era of storytelling that has since been explored in other media. Its influence can still be felt today, with its impact on games like Jedi Fallen Order and the upcoming Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake, which are set in the same era and feature similar gameplay mechanics. Knights of the Old Republic was a game that any Star Wars fan would love, and it remains a classic of the Xbox era. Now at number 13, we got Takedown, a game that truly showcased the Xbox capabilities, and it remains a classic of the era. Its addictive gameplay, fast-paced action, and challenging difficulty made it a game that players could sink hours into without even realizing it. The game's intuitive controls and well-designed levels made it accessible to players of all skill levels, while its high replayability ensured players would keep coming back for more. Takedown's success can be attributed to its perfect balance of accessibility and challenge, making it a game that was easy to pick up and play, but really, really hard to put down. The game's popularity also paved the way for future games in the genre. Overall, Takedown was a game that defined the Xbox era, and remains a classic that is still remembered fondly by fans today. Now, number 12, we got Jade Empire, a game that stood out from the crowd. Its unique setting, inspired by Chinese mythology, added a level of depth and richness to the game's world that was rarely seen in RPGs at the time. The game's story was engaging and kept players hooked from start to finish, with memorable characters and great dialogue that added to the game's overall charm. The game's combat system was also well designed, with a variety of moves and abilities that allowed players to take down enemies in a variety of ways. The game's morality system was also noteworthy, as it affected the game's story and ending, giving players a sense of agency and control over the game's narrative. Jade Empire was a game that any RPG fan would love, and its impact on the genre can still be felt today, with its influence on games like Ghost of Tsushima and Immortals Phoenix Rising, which also draw inspiration from mythology and offer engaging stories and memorable characters. Number 11, Halo Combat Evolved. Not just a great game, it was a cultural phenomenon. The game's impact on the gaming industry cannot be overstated, as it introduced new gameplay mechanics and set a standard for first-person shooters. The game's protagonist, Master Chief, has become an iconic character in the gaming world, and his battles against the Covenant were some of the most epic moments in gaming history. The game's multiplayer mode was also groundbreaking, with a matchmaking system that allowed players to easily find and join games with others around the world. Halo was a game that defined the Xbox, and it still holds up today as one of the greatest games of all time. Now, number 10, and somewhat of a mild flavored follow-up, we have SSX3. It was a snowboarding game that was one of Xbox's best arcade sports games. It offered players a great experience with its impressive trick system that allowed players to pull off insane moves. The game's controls were intuitive and easy to learn, making it a game that was easy to pick up and play. SSX3 also had a robust online multiplayer mode that allowed players to race and trick against their friends, adding to the game's replayability. The game's graphics were also impressive, with detailed character models and beautifully rendered environments that brought the game's world to life. Overall, SSX3 was a game that showcased the Xbox and remains a classic of the era. Although personally I'm more a fan of the AMP series than SSX, I can't deny that SSX definitely has its place in history. Now at number 9, we have Chaos Theory. This was a game that any stealth fan would love, with its innovative gameplay mechanics, engaging story, and memorable characters. The game's level design had a variety of environments that offered players a range of options for completing their objectives. The game's multiplayer mode was also a blast, allowing players to compete against each other in intense matches that required strategy and skill. The game's use of light and sound as gameplay mechanics was pretty groundbreaking, and it added a new level of depth to the stealth genre. The game's protagonist, Sam Fisher, became an iconic character in the gaming world, and his missions against a terrorist group known as the JBA were some of the most intense and memorable moments in gaming history. Overall, Chaos Theory is a game that set the standard for stealth games and remains a classic of the era with its innovative gameplay mechanics, engaging story, and memorable characters. Now at number 8, we got a true cult classic, Psychonauts, a game that certainly has stood out from the crowd. With its unique premise of exploring the minds of various characters, it was a breath of fresh air in the gaming industry and offered a level of creativity and innovation that was rarely seen in games at the time. The game's story was engaging and kept players hooked from start to finish, with memorable characters and great dialogue that added to the game's overall charm. The game's setting was also unique, with each level taking place in a different character's mind, offering a variety of environments and gameplay mechanics that kept the game fresh and exciting. Psychonauts was a game that any gamer would love, and its impact on the gaming industry can still be felt today, with its influence on games like Control and The Medium, which also explored the concept of exploring the mind. All right, now we're midway through, and there's probably other games you put on this list or mess around with the ranking a bit. So be sure to sound off in the comments on anything that you think deserves to be here that wasn't, or that maybe doesn't deserve to be on this list. Some of my favorites on the Xbox certainly missed this one, especially one, well, I can't really call it a great game because I haven't been able to play it, which is Shin Megami Tensei 9, which is stuck as one of the only Japanese Shin Megami Tensei games never to be translated. Let's hope we can change that. But with that said, let's go ahead and get on back to the list. At number 7, we got Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. Sands of Time was an action game that any action adventure fan would love, with its engaging story, memorable characters, and unique gameplay mechanics. The game's time manipulation abilities added a new layer of strategy to the game, allowing players to rewind time and correct mistakes, which was pretty groundbreaking at the time. The game's platforming elements were also noteworthy, with challenging puzzles and acrobatic maneuvers that kept players engaged and required them to think creatively. The game's combat system was well designed, with a variety of moves and abilities that allowed players to take down enemies in a whole lot of different ways. The game's graphics were stunning, with detailed character models and beautifully rendered environments that brought the game's world to life. Overall, The Sands of Time was a game that set the new standard for action-adventure games and remains a classic of the era, with its innovative gameplay mechanics, engaging story, and memorable characters. And I'm so glad we finally got confirmation that the remake is real. Let's hope Ubisoft doesn't screw that up. And speaking of Ubisoft screwing something up, at number 6, we got Beyond Good and Evil. A game that not only had a great story, but also tackled serious issues like government corruption and propaganda. The game's protagonist, Jade, was a strong and relatable character who fought against the oppressive government and uncovered the truth behind the conspiracy. The game's combat offered a variety of moves and abilities that kept players engaged. Beyond Good and Evil's unique setting, which blended elements of science fiction and fantasy, added to the game's overall charm and made it a standout title on the Xbox. It remains a classic of the era and a must-play for any gamer looking for a unique and engaging experience. And with that 20th anniversary edition that's about to roll out here, it makes it a lot easier for those of us who haven't played it to actually get down to business on it. Now, speaking of getting down to business, at number 5, we got Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, a game that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in an open world game. Rockstar had this in a vast and detailed world, an immersive story, and engaging gameplay, setting a new standard for games. Its impact on the gaming industry cannot be overstated, as it paved the way for all open world games in the future. San Andreas is a game that truly revolutionized the genre, introducing features like character customization, vehicle customization, and a vast array of side missions and activities. The game's attention to detail was unparalleled, with a world that felt alive and dynamic. The game's story is also noteworthy because, well, Rockstar knows how to write a story, that's for sure. Its memorable characters and a plot that tackled serious issues like gang violence and corruption. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is a game that will always be remembered as one of the greatest games of all time, and its influence can still be felt in modern open world games. At number 4, we got Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. It was a game that truly tested players' tactical skills. The game's single-player campaign was challenging and engaging, with a variety of missions that require players to think strategically and plan their approach. The game's AI was also impressive, with enemies that would adapt to the players' tactics and keep them on their toes. But it was the game's online multiplayer mode that really set it apart. Rainbow Six Siege's multiplayer is one of the best of any game on the Xbox, fight me, with a variety of game modes and maps that kept players coming back for more. The game's matchmaking system was well designed, allowing players to easily find and join games with others around the world. Overall, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege was a game that any tactical shooter fan would love. Its challenging single player campaign and robust online multiplayer mode made it a game that offered hours of gameplay and kept players coming back for more. It remains a classic of the Xbox era and a must play for any fan of the genre. Now, when you talk about must plays, there's very few games that follow under that more than this next game. That's right. At number 3, we have Elder Scrolls Morrowind, a game that absolutely revolutionized the RPG genre. Morrowind was not just any RPG game, it was the game. It was released in 2002 in the third installment in the Elder Scrolls series. Morrowind was developed by Bethesda Game Studios and published by Bethesda Softworks. The game is set in a fictional world of Tamriel, where players could explore a vast open world filled with unique creatures, characters, and landscapes. Morrowind was a game that offered players a level of freedom that was unheard of in RPG games at the time. Players could create their own character, choose their own path, and explore the world at their own pace. The game had a deep and immersive story that was filled with political intrigue, religious conflict, and ancient prophecies. The game's story was not linear, and players could choose to follow the main quest or explore the world and complete side quests instead. Morrowind's gameplay was also revolutionary. The game had a complex character creation system that allowed players to create a character that was unique to them. And the combat was based on a dice roll system that took into account the player's skills and attributes. The game's magic system was also complex, as players could create their own spells by combining different magical effects. Morrowind's open world was a game changer. The game's world was vast, filled with unique locations, creatures, and characters. It was handcrafted, which meant that every location in the game was designed with care and attention to detail. And it was also filled with secrets and hidden locations, which encouraged players to explore and discover new things. Morrowind's impact on the RPG genre cannot be overstated. The game's level of freedom, deep story, complex gameplay, and open world set a new standard for RPG games. The game's success paved the way for future games such as Oblivion and Skyrim, which has been released on everything except the fridge. So if somebody can port it to a fridge, please do it just for the meme. Seriously, do it. But it all built on a foundation Morrowind laid down. Morrowind was not just a game, it was a revolution. It was a game that set the new standard for RPG games and paved the way for future games in the genre. The level of freedom, deep story, complex gameplay, and open world made it a game that was far ahead of its time. And if you have not played Morrowind, I highly recommend you do so. It's a game every RPG fan should experience. Now, number 2, we have Halo 2, the Xbox's biggest exclusive that had the massive impact on the gaming industry. The game's single-player campaign was a pure masterpiece, with its engaging story, memorable characters, a unique setting that kept players hooked. The game's protagonist, Master Chief, an iconic gaming character. His battles against the Covenant are some of the most epic in history, as we established earlier. But what really set Halo 2 apart was the robust online multiplayer mode. The matchmaking system was revolutionary, allowing players to find and join games with others around the world. The multiplayer maps were expertly designed, offering a variety of gameplay styles and strategies. And the multiplayer also introduced new modes like Capture the Flag and Assault, which became staples in the Halo franchise. Halo 2 was a game that defined the Xbox and set the standard for first-person shooters on consoles. Its impact on the gaming industry cannot be overstated, and it holds up today as one of the best games of all time. Ooh, there are some heavy hitters so far. But what can we follow that up with? And I swear to you, I did not have anything to do with this choice, but it's one that I would put up there as possibly being number one myself. But Ninja Gaiden Black. This game takes the top spot on our list of games for the original Xbox, and for good reason. This game was not for the faint of heart. It's one of the most challenging and rewarding games on the console. The combat system was complex and required skill and precision to master, but once players got the hang of it, they were rewarded with an incredibly satisfying experience. The game's boss battles are some of the most intense and memorable of any game on the Xbox, and they push players to their limits. But the sense of accomplishment that came with defeating these bosses was unparalleled. Ninja Gaiden Black was a game that truly showcased the capabilities of the Xbox. The graphics were stunning, with detailed character models and beautifully rendered environments. The game's sound design is also noteworthy, with a great soundtrack and sound effects that added to the game's overall atmosphere. But it was the gameplay that really set Ninja Gaiden Black apart. The game's combat system is so deep and complex, with a variety of weapons and moves that you can use any way you want. It also had a great sense of momentum, with fast-paced action to keep players on their toes. Overall, Ninja Gaiden Black remains a classic of the era. It's a game that challenged players and rewarded them for their efforts, and it showcased the capabilities of the console in a way that few other games could. If you're a fan of action games or looking for a challenge, Ninja Gaiden Black is a must-play. And if you're into Souls games, give it a shot. You'll see what Souls games were like before Souls games existed. All right, so is that what you were expecting with Ninja Gaiden Black taking the number one spot? I'm sure you probably got other ideas. Let me know in the comments how your list would have shook out. And I hope you enjoyed this list. I hope that it brought back some memories of games that you had in your childhood, or that maybe you're being introduced to for the first time, that I hope you'll love. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this has been Azure Tony. Today, we definitely found some fun in gaming, and I hope you enjoyed yourselves too. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. I'll catch you next time.